Hi, it's Katrina. My friend David is going to be helping me out with the voiceover today, so I hope you enjoy.
Number 10. Life on the boat. The Battle of the Atlantic was the longest battle fought during World War II. It began at the very beginning of the war and didn't end until the closing days when Hitler died in his bunker. The official date is from September 3rd, 1939 to May 7th, 1945, lasting a total of 2,074 days. The reason the battle went on for so long is the German U-boat. These devastating submarines were terrorizers in the Atlantic Ocean throughout the war. Since it began in 1939, U-boats had one main goal. They were to destabilize trading routes, destroy enemy ships where possible, and attack movements across the Atlantic. But life aboard one of these deadly submarines was not something soldiers were lining up to do. Being on a submarine was downright miserable, like prison, except worse. Let's take life aboard a standard German U-505. It was absolutely awful. Crew members had roughly a 75% casualty rate, meaning 3 out of 4 people would die during the war. The U-505 had only 2 bathrooms to be shared among the 59 sailors, but only one of them was used. The other was for storing food. Speaking of food, the submarine was supplied with 12 tons, 12,000 kilograms of it, for the 2 months they would be at sea. Most of that food was chocolate. Meat was hung from pipes overhead. The whole submarine stank like waste, and there was no bathing. The only time a crew would get a bath was if they could swab themselves with alcohol. Crew members would suck on limes and lemons to try to prevent scurvy. Jazz records played almost non-stop and drove people to madness. Those aboard the submarine didn't see the light of day for upwards of 8, sometimes even 12 weeks. Number 9. The Ghost Fighter of Pearl Harbor. At approximately 7:48 a.m., December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor was attacked. The United States of America was officially dragged into World War II. The attack itself was carried out by 353 Imperial Japanese aircraft. Ships and submarines backed them up, and the naval base was helplessly pummeled. The Japanese figured the unexpected attack would convince the Americans to leave them alone, and that it would cripple their ability to fight back. The attack left 2,403 Americans dead and changed the course of history forever. But something else happened after the attack on Pearl Harbor that has never been explained. The next morning on December 8th, an unidentified plane was detected on radar flying toward Hawaii. It came out of nowhere. All attempts at radio contact were futile, and warplanes were scrambled to intercept the intruder. The planes found an American Curtiss P-40 Warhawk flying aimlessly. Its shell was riddled with bullet holes, the engine was sputtering, and the pilot in his seat was bloody and near death. Nobody knew who the pilot was or where the plane came from, but he had clearly been in a battle. Sadly, the plane fell from the sky before the pilot could be rescued. It exploded in a ball of fire. Even after investigators scanned the wreckage, they couldn't figure out where the plane came from or who it would have been fighting. The identity of the pilot was never revealed, and war historians still aren't sure the Ghost Fighter of Pearl Harbor even existed. It's one of the most genuine World War II mysteries out there. Number 8. Japan's Death Ray. World War II was the front line for cutting-edge technology, and during this time Japan was working on a secret death weapon. This was the first war that used weapons of the new age, and it spawned a lot of crazy ideas. The Nazis worked on all sorts of strange weapons, and the US experimented with things as bizarre as bat bombs. Japan even had their own death ray. It was called Kugo and was supposedly inspired by Nikola Tesla's creations. Nikola Tesla had been developing something he called the Teleforce. This weapon would use electrically charged particles to shoot down thousands of planes simultaneously at a distance of up to 200 miles, 322 kilometers. It would be a kind of radio tower that emitted incredible electric energy, zapping any plane that dared fly near it. It could have potentially been the most destructive weapon of the war, but it never saw the light of day. The Teleforce was only an idea. For it to be made, it would have cost a ton of money, and it wouldn't have been mobile. It was more of a defense mechanism. Japan tried to copy Tesla's idea and create their own electric death ray. Theirs turned out to be a kind of magnetron, something that would emit a beam of radio waves that could cause instant insanity or total psychological meltdowns. The beam used some of Tesla's ideas, but was more about causing instant death to those it touched. Luckily for everyone, It was never a success and never used on real combatants. Number 7. Calvin Graham. Calvin Graham was the youngest serviceman to fight in World War II on the side of the United States of America. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy on August 15, 1942 in Houston. Calvin was only 12 years old at the time. He went on to train at boot camp in San Diego for 6 weeks, then went to Pearl Harbor where he was assigned to the USS South Dakota. The young man would participate in the Battle of the Santa Cruz, then the Battle of Guadalcanal. He was wounded in the latter while helping operate a gigantic 40mm anti-aircraft gun. He was hit by shrapnel, and even though Calvin was wounded and heavily bleeding, he helped rescue other wounded servicemen. His bravery and valor earned him a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. But here's the thing about Calvin Graham. He was still only 13 years old at this point. When the ship returned for repairs to New York City, Calvin's mother got in touch with the Navy and revealed his age. The boy spent 3 months in a brig in Texas. He would have been there longer if his sister hadn't threatened to tell the newspapers that the Navy was employing children. His sister's blackmail got him out of the brig, he was discharged, and his awards were taken away. The next year, when Calvin was 14, he got married and had some children. He was divorced by 17 and then rejoined the army, this time in the Marine Corps. He fought in the Korean War, but broke his back and had to be sent home. Number 6. Aliens in the Sky. By far one of the creepiest tales from World War II has to do with strange objects in the night sky. Late on a November night in 1944, Lieutenant Fred Ringwald witnessed what appeared to be giant glowing red cigars hovering in the sky north of Strasbourg, on the border of France and Germany. He was quoted as saying to one of his comrades, "I wonder what those lights are over there in the hills." Fred was not the only one who witnessed the strange objects. Everyone else in his squadron saw them too. 10 glowing orange objects flying through the sky and turning on a dime. These things were extremely mobile, doing maneuvers not even the most sophisticated rockets of the day could do. The soldiers were so confused by what they were seeing that they reached out to Allied ground radar, but the guys on radar hadn't registered anything, and so the pilots figured they had encountered a new type of German air weapon. They got ready to fight, but then the lights suddenly disappeared. The UFOs became known as Foo Fighters. There were multiple sightings of red glowing objects in the sky, all throughout Europe during World War II. Some believe the objects were alien spacecraft, watchers from another planet who came to see if humanity would destroy itself through war. What do you think the soldiers saw? Tell us in the comments below and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 5. William Hitler. Just about everybody in the world knows the name of Adolf Hitler, but almost nobody knows William Hitler, the unsuspecting nephew of Adolf who served as a member of the US Armed Forces during World War II. William was the blood nephew of the leader of the Third Reich, yet he fought against his uncle and was awarded a Purple Heart for his valor. After the war, he moved to New York, got married, and changed his name. After the war, people only knew him as William Patrick Stewart Houston. After all, imagine the reception he would have gotten from his neighbors if he continued going by Will Hitler. William was not the only Hitler out there in the world. He was born in Liverpool in March of 1911. His mother was Irish and she married Alois Hitler Jr. in Dublin 2 years before William was born. Alois Hitler was from Austria and was Adolf's half-brother. The couple eloped, moved to the UK, and William was born an Englishman. 31 years later, William's home in Liverpool was obliterated by the Germans. The order came from none other than Adolf, William's uncle. Number 4. Moe Berg, the spy. Moe Berg was not the best baseball player in the world. He played 15 Major League Baseball seasons on 4 different teams, but sat on the bench more often than not. Yet in 1934, Morris Berg was chosen to travel with the American All-Star Baseball team as they toured around Japan. He was without a doubt the worst player on the team, batting alongside famous names like Babe Ruth. Why in the world was such a terrible player given such a prestigious appointment? Most historians are fairly certain it's because Moe Berg was a spy, even if it was never disclosed. While the rest of his team was exploring Tokyo and having fun, Berg was busy taking pictures and film of the Tokyo skyline. He visited places like Tokyo Harbor, checked out the tallest building in the city, and casually photographed munitions facilities. Later in 1942, when the US completed bombing raids against Tokyo, they did so using the footage captured by the secret agent baseball player. We don't know if Moe Berg worked as a spy in 1934, but he was officially hired by the United States Office of Strategic Services in 1942. That was the predecessor of the CIA. They officially recruited Berg after using his footage to help bomb Tokyo. His first official mission was to go on a goodwill tour of Latin America, while secretly learning if Latin American leaders would be willing to side with the Americans in the war. He was even sent to the Soviet Union to gather information. Have you ever heard of Morris Berg? Number 3. John McKinney. John McKinney was a soldier in World War II who did the unimaginable. John would go down in history as a real-life Rambo, the man who fought 100 Japanese soldiers single-handedly. John was part of a campaign to recapture the Philippines from the Japanese in 1945, when everything went horribly wrong. Early in the morning on May 11th, while John was stationed on the island of Luzon, the Japanese launched a surprise attack. The vanguard slipped past the guard post and were preparing to silently attack. One of the Japanese soldiers slipped into John's tent and tried to cut his head off with a sword, but he missed, severing part of his ear. John then grabbed the rifle he was sleeping with and finished the other guy off. For the next 36 minutes, John fought to protect the flank of his group and to defend his sleeping friends from 100 soldiers. He managed to kill 38 of them, many in hand-to-hand combat. He walked away missing a piece of his ear, but otherwise no worse for wear. John was given a Medal of Honor by President Harry Truman himself on January 23, 1946. Number 2. Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl was the author of children's books who spent the 1940s as a secret spy. He served as a fighter pilot in the Royal Air Force but wasn't so great at the job. In September of 1940, he crashed his biplane in the Egyptian desert and got lost. With a fractured skull, the young man narrowly escaped death and was rescued by his fellow pilots. After months recovering in the hospital, he was unable to continue fighting because of periodic blackouts and brutal headaches. Roald Dahl was reassigned in 1942, given a diplomatic post in Washington, D.C. There he began his writing career, finishing his first book, The Gremlins, in 1943. It was around that time that he was recruited as an undercover agent by the British Security Coordination Network. He was charged with spying on the greatest ally of Britain, the US. This is one of the stranger things that Britain did during the war. The organization had about 1,000 agents working for them in the United States of America. Their job was to create pro-British propaganda while inciting extra hate for the Nazis. The hope was that the Americans would join World War II. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the network pushed their narrative even harder to instigate Americans into the fight. The famous children's author was pivotal in the efforts to sway public opinion, essentially soaking the US in pro-war propaganda. Number 1. Operation Bolivar. Operation Bolivar was one of the largest clandestine missions in World War II. The Germans established a spy ring in Latin America, bigger than any other in the world. Germans controlled a huge amount of secret information traveling through Latin America to Europe. They had a secret communication network with its base in Argentina. They also had a courier system so complex it would make your head spin. They used Spanish merchant vessels to ship highly sensitive information in the form of paper letters to their counterparts in Europe. Information was paramount during the war, and the Germans went through extreme lengths to get it where it needed to be. They were so desperate to keep their secrets that they took over Latin America and turned it into their own personal information distribution center. However, what the Germans didn't realize was that the Allies intercepted a huge number of their covert transmissions. Operation Bolivar was more helpful to the Americans than to the Germans. In 1944, Argentine authorities finally cracked down and arrested most of the German operators in their country. Do you think you could ever pull off being a spy? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Come back soon for more amazing videos, and remember to subscribe.